Good morning, Year 3. Welcome to our writing lesson for this morning. And we will again focus on writing poetry. So the ally today is to write your own poem in the style of a poet studied this week. Now we're going to start this session with a fun activity. So let's look at what this activity involves. Once again, make sure that you have a pencil or pen and a paper, and use the pause button whenever you need to. So let's start our past tense quiz. So you need to select the word that fits in the sentence. I something to the mall after school. So select the word below that fits in the missing space. Number 2, my brother ate bear an hour ago. Which word fits in the empty space? Number 3, the word goes at the beginning of the sentence. Something Mike visit his grandmother last night. Which word goes in the empty space? So it has to be in the past tense, remember. If I'm going too quickly, use the pause button. Number 4, Alex did not last weekend. Which word goes in the empty space? Number 5, the word goes at the beginning of the sentence, and if you add it in, it'll read, whatever you choose, Judy and Liz at last month's meeting. So select the word. Moving on to number 6, we something not happy after the sad ending. Which word do you need to select? Number 7, which word do you put at the beginning of this sentence? Remember, the sentence when you read it after selecting the word has to be in the past tense. So, sorry, I hear you at the door. Select the word that you need to put in the empty space. Number 9, going to continue with showing the words. Select the word that fits in the empty space. And last of all, number 10, okay, we've come to the end of that. So if you have paused the video, fine, you'll catch up with the lesson in your own time. I'm going to continue with the lesson. So let's move on. Now, at the beginning of the week, we had the poem Excuses. So today, you're going to have an activity related to the poem below, which is titled All My Great Excuses. So you have to fill in the gaps with the past simple tense of the verb in the brackets. I'll give you the first answer. So the sentence or phrase starts with I start on my homework. Now that would not be in the past simple tense. So I would put I started on my homework. So you use the word start and then decide, does it stay the same, or do I add a suffix, or do I change that word completely? So I started on my homework. And let's now move to the second line. But my pen run out of ink. Now that doesn't make grammatical sense. What do you change the word run to? So it does make sense, and it's in the past. Moving to line number 3, my hamster eat my homework. Now we want that word eat to be changed to the past, so we have to change that word, and it's not going to be eat. What will it become? And I'm going to carry on. My computer's on the blink. I accidentally drop it. Now, of course, it's not the word drop. What should it be? Use the word drop. That is the clue to which word should fit in the empty space. I accidentally something it in the soup my mum was cooking. So there's plenty of excuses here about the boys' homework. I'm going to move on to the next line. My brother, and the clue is flush it down the toilet when I wasn't looking. What does the word flush become? And the next line, my mother run my homework through the washer and the dryer. What do you change run to? An airplane crash into our house. What do you change crash to? Volcanoes, this is a difficult one, strike our town. Now it has to happen in the past. So what do you change the word strike to? And last of all, in the final sentence, I work on these excuses so long my teacher said, I think you'll find it's easier to do the work instead. So stop making up all those excuses, just get on and do your homework. So once again, press the pause button if you need to, and I look forward to checking your work when you send it in. Hopefully you understood all of that. So remember at the beginning, you can't keep start because it won't be in the past tense. You have to change start to started. I started on my homework. I'm going to move on. Okay, so today is about you selecting a style of poetry or the poet that you liked, and I'm going to show you some of the poems that we've studied and learned about this week. So we've got the dragonfly out in the sun, which we had this morning in the reading session, full of similes and has metaphors there. So did you like that style of poetry? Or from yesterday, My Invisible Dragon. And I've read some of your poems and I forgot to get them out to read the poems to you, but I will definitely do it on Monday morning. So My Invisible Dragon, did you like that style of poetry? And then on Tuesday we had the sound collector, and lots of people went around collecting sounds and then wrote their poem. Did you like that poet's particular style of poetry? So you need to decide, would you select one of these three? Or we're going to go over to the next page shortly. So it's up to you to decide which style of poem you preferred. So therefore, your task today will be to, before you start, you need to think about these things. So we've got rathers. Did you like that style of poetry? Did you like that poet? Or at the beginning of the week, we had Please Mrs. Butler, and we had Excuses, which I haven't included here. But if you want to do your own version of that style, that would be fine. So things that you need to think about if you start thinking about which poem you're going to reproduce. Think about the punctuation. How does the punctuation affect your poem? Because you can see that if we go back, they are all punctuated in a different way. And of course, I think the sound collector stands out the most. There is no punctuation until, I've only got the first three verses here, but there's no punctuation at all in the first three verses, except each line always starts with a capital letter. That's it. But there are no full stops, no exclamation marks, no commas, and so on. So virtually no punctuation until you get to the very end of the sound collector. Whereas if you look at the Invisible Dragon, on line 1 and 2, those sentences end with a full stop, and then there's a full stop at the end of line 4. And there are commas there as well. And you can look in, please Mrs. Butler, where does the punctuation take place? What kind of punctuation is there? So if you're trying to copy that style, you also need to copy how they punctuate their poem, because yours need to be the same. Alliteration, we've been through that this week. All the poems I've seen, most people have included alliteration, so we don't need to discuss alliteration. Onomatopoeia, well, when you were the sound collector, everyone who did the poem managed to collect some examples of onomatopoeia. And then rhyme. We talked about a rhyming scheme yesterday, an ABAB rhyme scheme. That style of poetry is more difficult because you have to have a good selection of words that rhyme. And sometimes trying to get your poem to rhyme is very tricky. So it takes a lot of planning and thinking if you want a rhyming poem. And we know that in rathers, in line 1 and 2, be and me rhyme. And then line 3, 4 and 5, it has owl, 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 which rhyme. Those three are the same word, so therefore they rhyme. And then in the line, what line number is that? 7 and 8, that has town and down. So those words rhyme as well. But it is a more difficult style of poetry if you want it to rhyme. And you are supposed to copy the style of the poet. So if they have rhyming words, you need to have the rhyming words in the same lines that they use. So verses or stanzas, well, they look different in terms of their shape. Some verses have more lines. Some verses have less. Some verses have less words in each phrase or sentence. And please Mrs. Butler, as you can see, only has 4 lines in verse 1, whereas if you look at rathers, there are 10 lines in that verse. So much longer, and also the sentences in rathers are longer generally. Okay, so verses and stanzas do make a difference. So it also changes the shape of your poem. And similes, well, we came across those this morning in the Dragonfly poem. And we also metaphors. These metaphors in particular are very tricky. So some people, we will practice metaphors more next week. So don't worry if you find using metaphors in your poem difficult. But you only need to use a metaphor if you choose a style of poetry that uses metaphors. You don't necessarily need to. Okay, so let's have a look at an invisible dragon, just so that you can see that you need to observe, look closely, analyze the poem for things like, to begin with, punctuation. First line ends with a full stop, second line ends with a full stop, and the third line ends with a full stop. In the second line, there is alliteration, she's such, and in the third line, there's alliteration, she soars. And further along, which I haven't highlighted, is sky. That is part of the same alliteration. So they all begin with the same sound. And finally, if you look at the end of line 2 and 4, you have flyer and fire. They rhyme. So this poem has punctuation, alliteration, rhyming, and you will need to know about all of these devices that are used by the poet if you copy their style of poetry. So think very carefully about which style of poetry you prefer. It's a personal thing. And once you know which style you want to replicate or reproduce or write a version of, jot down all your ideas first. So there's a planning stage involved, and you need to think about, do you need to use alliteration, rhyme, repetition? onomatopoeia, similes and metaphors, or any other devices. And once again, check the punctuation used in the poem and the layout of each verse. Now, once you've done that, you're ready to do your draft copy. So don't forget, you do need a title for your poem. So today, you're going to try and do verse 1 of the poem that you decide to reproduce or do a version of. So you do verse 1, verse 2, verse 3 if you're energetic enough. And once you've done that, you may have found that actually your draft copy is like a good copy. But if you have done it very rough, then you may need to do a final copy with an illustration. And that really depends on whether or not you have enough time. And that will be the end of your English lessons for Friday and the week. Once again, email your work to yr3@grange.harrow.sch.uk. And I look forward to reading your amazing poetry this weekend, which I'll have to read and mark before Monday. And I do promise that I'll share your poetry with everyone on Monday. Have an enjoyable weekend. Take care. Be safe. Bye for now.